Welcome everyone to Suburban Action Week, day number 3. Welcome to the DuPage County update with Sid Kenyon. So I am Maggie Sherwinski. I'm an advocacy manager at Active Trans, and I've got Heather Shady here. She'll be helping out. She's our senior planner at Active Trans. And while we're doing this, if you have any questions, please add them to the chat. And we'll get to those after the presentation portion of this. So now I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Sid Kenyon. He's the Senior Transportation Planner of DuPage County Division of Transportation. So welcome, Sid, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I see some familiar faces in the chat, so good to see that you guys are all doing well amid both a extended pandemic as well as a extended polar vortex. Hopefully that'll be over soon. So I'm going to jump right in to make sure we have enough time for some questions at the end. As Maggie mentioned, for those of you that haven't met me before, I'm the Senior Transportation Planner with DuPage County's DOT, and in that role, I serve as a Trails Coordinator and ADA Coordinator, in addition to other duties. So what we're going to talk about today is, first, I'm going to sort of put the county network in context in a very general fashion. And we're going to discuss 3 projects that have taken place. We'll start with the ADA Transition Plan, which we completed last year, the East Branch DuPage River Trail, which is ongoing and moving into phase 1 engineering. And then we have the DuPage Trails Plan, which will be beginning this year. So we are blessed to have a wealth of bikeway facilities, trail facilities, and a very diverse network throughout DuPage. The total network that we have inventoried is over 400 miles of bikeways and trails. That includes on-street facilities as well as off-street and side path facilities that currently exist today. That number does not include any of the loop trails within parks that may or may not allow bicyclists. If you include that number, it escalates to somewhere about 500 miles. So there's a lot of bikeway facilities and trail facilities for people to visit, acreages of forest preserves, acreages of public space that are connected by this network. Countywide, we have 210 miles of regional trails. And if I recall, there's somewhere about 7 or 8 regional trails that are planned and or existing through DuPage County, and we have 82 miles of that is maintained by the county DOT. If you want to learn more about our network after our talk today, maybe explore the DuPage Trails app, which is our mapping and navigation software. Look at some project updates, learn some history about the trails. You can go to dupageco.org/bikeways. We regularly have that information updated and available for you. First project we're going to talk about is our ADA Transition Plan for county public rights of way. Just as a quick disclaimer, this is only for our public rights of way. This does not include the county buildings. So our county campus is included, but not the buildings themselves. We have a different department in charge of that. What is a transition plan? For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, an ADA transition plan is a plan to bring all of our facilities into compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that generally covers all pedestrian facilities in the public right-of-way, such as sidewalks, curb ramps, and push buttons. These types of facilities are critical for ensuring that people with disabilities can access the pedestrian network in the same way that all of us who are also able-bodied can as well. Curb ramps are critical for allowing wheelchairs to cross the curb, for allowing people who may have low vision to know that they are approaching an intersection, and so on and so forth. Push buttons are critical for, again, people with low vision to know when it's safe to cross the intersection, and sidewalks and allowing them to be in a good state of repair and level for wheelchairs and for people with other mobility affecting disabilities can safely navigate the network. All of these things are critical pieces of the transition plan. By the numbers, our county highways network is approximately 220 center line miles. So that's basically what you see on a general county highways map, is 220 miles of network. Beside those highways, we have 200 miles of sidewalk. Last I checked, that is approximately 75 to 80% of our county highways network possessing a sidewalk beside it on at least one side. Some of the locations where we have county highways are relatively lower density locations. And so we are working on making new connections with our sidewalk and trails network as we speak. We have an annual sidewalk program that adds new facilities as well as upgrading non-compliant ADA facilities to make them compliant. We have 1,905 curb ramps at the corners that were surveyed as part of this transition plan, 343 traffic signals throughout the network, and 49 bridges. Bridges are another critical element because they are expensive to construct and maintain. And for us to upgrade those are critical pieces of that complete streets identity. Complete bridges are, especially in a place like DuPage where there are a lot of waterway crossings, very important for making the pedestrian network whole. If you want to learn more about the transition plan, which is pictured to the right here, you can go to dupageco.org/DOT/ADA. We have our ADA accessibility statement, as well as any materials that were part of the plan, including materials that were shared at public meetings. The next project I'd like to talk about is the East Branch DuPage River Trail. We're specifically looking at the Great Western Trail to Route 38, also known as Roosevelt Road. For those of you that are unfamiliar with this trail, it is a generally north-south oriented trail in central DuPage County that is planned to be roughly parallel to the East Branch of the DuPage River. It stretches from Roselle to the DuPage and Will County line, at least within the DuPage area, but it does actually meet up with the West Branch of the DuPage River Trail as it is planned in Will County to continue on as the DuPage River Trail. So what I want to share with you today is this chunk that we worked on that we're moving forward with into phase 1 engineering. We began an alignment study in 2019 that was really a planning level study with the help of an engineering firm to vet and tweak this planned alignment that had existed out there, but we had really struggled to make progress on for various reasons, whether they be competitiveness for grant funding or constructability, all of the above. And as part of that process, we wanted to identify key barriers and all the options available to us to overcome them. And those options included constructible alternatives. We coordinated a alternative analysis with our key stakeholders, a steering committee, in order to determine the best way to progress into the next stages of engineering and ultimately construction. And so the outcome that represents that is what we're calling a preferred alignment. We identified a constructible alignment between the Great Western Trail and Roosevelt Road. Like I said, that is going to progress into engineering. And where we're at right now is, up next is phase 1. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the project development process for roads and trails, phase 1, generally speaking, there's a lot more that goes into it, but I'm just hitting the highlights here. Involves environmental clearances, identifying structure types and locations. So whether you're going over or under critical crossings, over or under perhaps state routes, highways, railroads, and really kicking off the interagency coordination needed in order to accomplish those punch throughs through the barriers that exist out there. We did a lot of that interagency coordination up front, so we're hoping that maybe it'll just be a refresher for those of the folks who've been in the room, and moving on to really finding the best way to overcome any of the existing barriers that are out there right now. The next phase after that is phase 2, which is typically design. That's when you really drill down and identify the ultimate alignment and create a set of plans that are constructible. And acquisition and construction, typically securing right-of-way from adjacent properties or securing easements, maybe for access, maybe for any other sort of temporary or permanent purpose. We anticipate that a lot of our land acquisition will probably be easements at critical crossings. And finally, then constructing the facility. So we've got a little ways to go before we get to the construction phase. That's several years out. But in the meantime, we have secured funding to support the project as it's developed. The first stage for the alignment study, we secured a statewide planning and research grant, also known as SPR, from IDOT. That funded a significant portion of the alignment study. After that, after we identified that preferred alignment north of Roosevelt, we have applied for the Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program grant for funds to support phase 1 engineering. And a special thank you to Active Trans for helping to push the state to bolster that program. We're confident that we are going to secure those funds. Nothing is certain, but we're very hopeful. We have a very competitive project. And after we move past phase 1 and phase 2 engineering, we will be looking to secure capital grant funds, some of the big ticket grant funds out there, such as perhaps CMAQ and TAP, to fund the construction of this segment. If you want to learn more about the project, we have a project website that we'll be periodically updating through the project development process at ebdrt.com. And finally, the last project I'd like to talk about today is called the DuPage Trails Plan. This is for the Illinois Prairie Path, Great Western Trail, and Southern DuPage Regional Trail. These are our focus trails that we're going to be looking at as part of this plan. And the concept is really to update our trails maintenance policy, which is our existing guidelines for how the trail envelope is maintained, protected, enhanced. And the last one that we developed was in 2003. We feel like there have been a lot of issues that have come up since then that require an update, invasive species for vegetation, maybe signage guidelines, what's permitted as far as, what sort of trail installations that may be installed by members of the public, volunteer groups, et cetera. And these are things that we'd really like to revisit and coordinate through this project development process. And you might see the word plan and you might think that we're planning additional alignments, but really the plan is more for that framework and those guidelines for how we want to protect the trail. You could almost think of it as a state of good repair, fix it first kind of deal, focusing on that trail user experience and enhancing that. So in line with that, our goals for this project are to develop a strong framework for trail management, which is, as we've envisioned, and I've said previously, modernizing that existing trails maintenance policy. We'd also like to identify some opportunities to improve our vegetation maintenance. I think I also alluded to the fact that invasive species has become a bit of an issue for us, and as pervasive as it's been, we've gotten some feedback from County Board to coordinate with other agencies, including with other agencies within DuPage, to identify opportunities to improve our vegetation maintenance practices, and so on and so forth. And vegetation maintenance is not just done by the county. ComEd comes through and has to maintain clearance from electrical lines to preserve your service and hopefully not end up like the unfortunate folks in Texas and keep your energy going, right? So then we want to look at options for how to preserve and improve the trail envelope, which, like I've said before, in a way, it functions as a public space, as a destination in of itself, but it's also a transportation corridor. So you want to find the best way to manage those two. To balance those two interests together to give trail users the best trail use experience. And then finally, in order to get to all those things, we have some consensus building that we need to go through as well. The Prairie Path and the Great Western Trail, and actually the Southern DuPage Regional Trail as well. All three of these regional trails are managed by more than just DuPage County, right? There's municipalities, there's park districts, and we really want to reach out to those partners and work with them to identify, again, opportunities to help the trail be something that maybe their residents or their visitors would like to see. And we also have tremendous volunteer and advocacy organizations in DuPage that have strong opinions on what they think the trail user experience should look like. And we want to engage them as part of the process as well. Our timeline for this project is about 18 months. We anticipate kicking this off in late spring. We probably will have a draft plan developed sometime mid to late next year. And then by the end of next year, we would have a final plan document. So to learn more about that, unfortunately, I don't have anything up there for you yet, but keep your eye on the DuPage Bikeways page where we will periodically provide updates as to how that project is going. And I'm sure that a lot of you who are engaged with the volunteer and advocate groups in DuPage or who are tuned in with those folks will hear some rumblings about how the plan is going as well, because we will be involving them. So thank you for your time. And with that, I'll take any questions if some have popped up in the chat box.
Yeah, thanks, Sid. Yes, there's a handful of questions. So Heather and I will alternate reading them. I'll start with the first one. One sec. Let's see. So someone was wondering about the sidewalks and accessibility right now, given all the snow. And I know you have been out there plowing snow, but can you share any details about that?
Yes. Before I get into that, would you like me to stop screen sharing?
Oh, yes. That would be great. Yes, so then we can see each other.
So the question was about the state of the sidewalks. DuPage does not do snow removal for our sidewalks and paths. So unfortunately, they are probably still covered in snow for now. We tend to try to keep those open on the county campus. But that's not necessarily our group that does that. But out there on the roads, we are 100% focused on clearing the road for people to be able to move about through the county.
Is it sometimes that municipalities will clear county sidewalks?
As far as I don't know if they do. I don't think that they do. So as far as I know, probably not.
Okay, should we go on to the next one? So I think this is in relation to the East Branch DuPage River Trail. The question is, will it go north to Bussy Woods?
I think that the route of the trail is intended to get you to a trail that would bring you to Bussy Woods. So the short answer is not quite, but the North Central DuPage Regional Trail is, as it's planned, is intended to bring you to either to Bussy Woods or to the Salt Creek, depending on how that connection is ultimately created. But the Salt Creek Regional Trail does bring you to Bussy Woods. So, by way of other trails, it would be able to get you there.
And then another question from Terry about, I guess, signage. Will that be wayfinding signage, whether that's for the East Branch DuPage River Trail or all of the trails that you're working on?
Yes. And we envision that process is going to preserve a significant amount of elements that are probably already out there today. The Prairie Path Corporation has worked diligently over the years to brand the Prairie Path, and same thing with the Friends of the Great Western Trail. So I imagine that we are going to preserve those historical elements while trying to identify a way that we can create some consistent signage guidelines for the trail and help users find their way around a little easier.
So the next question, also from Terry, when will the Bloomingdale Trail be built, Sid?
The Bloomingdale Trail? Well, Terry, you and I have conversed about various trails a lot. So I suspect you're referring to the crossing over 290. Is that correct? I think I saw you nod.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I
saw him
think
nod
I
his
saw a
head.
nod.
I don't know. That's not our road, so that doesn't show up in our program. I would bet that that's probably either Itasca or Addison. And I haven't heard any rumblings from them as far as pushing to complete that trail connection. But to your point, that'd be pretty critical to get people to the Salt Creek. So like we've discussed before, if we're trying to get people to and from the East Branch or other trails to Bussey Woods, that piece would be critical in allowing folks to do that.
All right, next question comes from Kay, again about the East Branch DuPage River Trail. Do you know, she thought it was supposed to reach the Arboretum?
Yes, to the south, it is supposed to reach the Arboretum. The planned alignment south of Butterfield Road is supposed to either parallel 53 or go through the Forest Preserve, one of the two. And actually, in some spots, they might be duplicated because there is existing trail out there. But the short answer is yes, it's supposed to get you to the front door of the Arboretum.
Okay. The next question, I believe this is regarding the East Branch DuPage River Trail as well. From Terry, will you have a resident input meeting?
Yes, built into the engineering process, we are required to have public meetings. And so at that time, we will certainly, whether it still be the COVID pandemic or a significant portion of people are vaccinated by that time, I'm not sure. But if we do get to the point that people are vaccinated, we will have an in-person meeting. If not, it will probably be a remote meeting. So yes, that will come into play.
And Sid, for the trail plan, will there also be resident input opportunities?
Yes, there will be.
Well, how can people find out when there is a meeting? The best way.
Like I said, keep your eye on the DuPage Bikeways website. We are still in the process of selecting a consultant for that project. So the details of the project have not been fully worked out, but we will have things like that posted for you for your information.
And then a question from Ginger. She sends thanks to you, and she's wondering about the East Branch DuPage River Trail.com, the website, when there are plans to update it, because she says the latest news is from July of 2019.
That's correct. That news is a little bit dated, and we are working on a couple of leftover pieces, from our last steering committee meeting. And so once we are finished with those, I think we'll have an update for folks to look at the website. You're welcome.
This is a question from Ron S. There's a lack of east-west options in the northern third of the county. Are there any plans for east-west routes parallel to Irving Park Road or Lake Street?
Yes. First of all, your point is accurate. And we actually embarked on a planning project a few years ago that sort of overlapped with the time that I first arrived at the county in order to improve those east-west connections. So that is called the Elgin O'Hare Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. We identified locations where we felt that it was critical to improve that east-west connectivity in that northern third of the county. The Elgin O'Hare Bike Ped Plan, goal of that plan was to connect to the new bikeways that were going to be constructed along 390. So we have the communities along 390 as part of that plan, as well as to the west and to the north on the Cook side. So this was both sides of the Cook and DuPage line to identify connectivity there. So to get to the answer to your question, Not only did we identify north-south routes to connect to that new, I call it a 390 bikeway, but it's north and south Thorndale, whatever you want to call it. We also looked at locations to the west and locations to the north and south where east-west connectivity was critical. And so roads like Irving Park, we did propose side path along Irving Park. We did propose side path along some of the other east-west routes that are parallel to that as well. I haven't looked at that plan in a long time, so it's not on the top of my head at the moment, but I know that was a critical piece of that.
Is that plan still posted online somewhere?
Yes, I'd have to dig it up and find the link for you.
And then there's a question from Terry. It says, will trail go into Western access? And I'm not sure if that refers to the East Branch, DuPage, or another trail.
So Terry and I have spoken on numerous occasions about providing access to the new Western access terminal that would ultimately be at the O'Hare Airport. And short answer is we have not precluded any bike ped access to the west side of the airport when we ultimately construct a new terminal. There is a side path. If it hasn't been constructed yet, it should already be out there along York on the west side of the airport. And going to the west, there's the bikeway network that continues to the west parallel to 390. So we've already set that up to be connected to in the future. The ramps and the interchange over that intersection of Thorndale and York, they don't preclude any future bike ped access to Elgin O'Hare. I'm sorry, Elgin O'Hare Western access. So we can make those connections. In the short term, we're going to be working with Cook to identify the best way to get people from the east into the airport. I know that there are already bike racks in various facilities in the airport, but I think it's going to be interesting for Cook to work through ideas for how to give people sort of a long-term bike parking facility for folks who want to take a plane ride and come back in a week.
Okay. The next question is from Robert Wagner. Can you better define trail envelope with regards to the DuPage Trails Plan? Will there be a chance for municipalities to provide input?
To the second part of your question, the answer is absolutely yes. To the first part of your question, trail envelope is my general term referring to just the property that the trail is on. So, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Prairie Path and Great Western Trail, those rail trails, they came about from the acquisition of former railroad rights-of-way back in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and conversion of that track bed into a usable, bike ped facility. So, because they were built for railroads, and because that property was secured with the ultimate intent in mind of perhaps expanding railroad service or other transportation uses, we do have some spots where the property is very wide and some where it's rather narrow. And in those locations where that width changes, maybe there's some opportunity to improve recreational opportunities. Maybe there's some opportunity to improve vegetation, maybe preservation of the trail envelope, as I'm calling it, as a environmental corridor, as a place where various biota, birds, fauna, can coexist, etc. And so there's a lot of different thoughts and ideas that are out there as to what to do with those spaces. And we certainly want to get the ideas from our municipal partners who help to maintain the trail and whose residents use it, as far as what they'd like to see out there as well.
All right, next question is from Ginger. How does Complete Streets impact transportation decisions for the county, and what about IDOT?
What about IDOT? We always point to our Healthy Roads initiative as our Complete Streets policy. And I think more of what that policy did was it sort of opened up the gate for us to explore those bike ped connections more, rather than precluding us from doing that. So to answer your question, where that comes in, I think it's always a piece that we're thinking about. It's always a piece that we try to include as much as we can. And, you know, especially for grant funded projects, I think that it makes roadway projects more competitive when they have that bike ped component. Obviously, people in DuPage love it, and we like doing things that the public appreciates. So I think there's a lot of positive push in that direction for us to do that, and so we try to find ways to create bike ped connections wherever we can.
Sorry, I've lost track of where I'm at. I think the next question is from Kay. Why do many big bridges have sidewalks that go nowhere, like Mill Road over 88?
That's a really good question. Mill Road over 88, that's not a bridge that I've driven over very often. But I think if I'm picturing it correctly in my head, it's partly because the connection on the other side may not have been created yet. So the best way to put it is the bridge is almost always the biggest obstacle to continuing the sidewalk network. So we might get out there, replace the bridge, and add either a path or a sidewalk, some type of bike ped facility on the side. And it might just sit out there and not be connected to for a little while because we haven't built the sidewalk or the path yet. So if I'm picturing Mill Street in my mind correctly, I believe on one side of the bridge, there isn't a sidewalk connection to it. And so, yeah, it just kind of ends. But, you know, if that's something that you'd like us to pursue in the future as part of a sidewalk project, you know, that's certainly something that we can talk about and explore. We have an annual sidewalk program that does also encompass ADA facilities, and so we could pursue that as part of that program.
Sid, that program are there opportunities then, public meetings related to that program, or is it a municipality should be contacting you for ideas or suggestions?
We get requests kind of from all over the place. So it could come from anywhere. It could come from a municipality maybe working with us on the project. Typically, I think we get it from the public though. So, you know, if you are interested in us exploring a connection, you know, maybe we could talk about the best way to accommodate that offline, and see if that's something that we could explore.
Great. And a comment from Ginger. She says residents can put in comments now at the East Branch DuPage River Trail.com website, ebdrt.com, and they can also sign a petition to show support for that trail at eastbranchtrail.org. And then a question from Jeff. Do we have a plan for engaging Union Pacific Railroad to overcome that barrier for East Branch Trail? And I know that railroads can be a challenge. So could you speak to that?
We have, first of all, it's a great question. And it is one that has caused us, not quite consternation yet, but we are very concerned about it. We are concerned about that connection. So to answer your question, yes, we've given that a lot of thought. We've done some research into what it's going to take in order to overcome any railroad barriers, specifically with Union Pacific. We've had a talk with a representative from Union Pacific on more than one occasion about what their expectations are. Their process is rather rigid, so I don't foresee them making any changes to whatever requests or clearances they're going to make of us, whether they be costly to us or not. But you know, we do have the expertise of the village of Glen Ellen as one of our partners in the East Branch DuPage River Trail project, and they had to do that coordination with Union Pacific in order to make improvements to their train station. And so they've, in addition to the Taylor Street underpass as well. So they've already had to do this, twice now, and we are going to rely on them heavily to help guide us through the process.
Sorry, finishing typing. So the next question is from Ginger. Do you know when Dan Cronin's next Bike to Work Week will be?
Oh man, it'd be great if he could do that again this year. It's usually in June, right? But I don't normally hear about what we're doing for Bike to Work Day, Bike to Work Week until about 2 months from now. It probably all depends on the amount or the rate of vaccinations as we move forward. He's been very involved in coordinating with the other counties in the region, other legislators in the region for response to COVID. So if things are looking positive, he'll do it.
Great. Question from Richard about street crossings of major streets. When biking east-west on the Prairie Path and Great Northern Trail, he says they're inconsistent. It's primarily bikers beware, but a few streets such as the Prairie Path at Main Street, I think in Lombard, have flashing lights. Are there any plans to increase the number of flashing lights and signs requiring cars to yield to walkers, runners, bikers?
I appreciate this question because you're right that it is inconsistent with the Prairie Path and Great Western Trail, the various crossings and what they look like. And so we are going to explore ways that we can mesh better with cyclist and trail user expectation, sort of drawing from the parlance of what we say about motorists with motorist expectation. I think that that the guidance on some of the facilities that you've mentioned, such as the RRFBs and warning signage and things like that. I think the guidance is it's pretty clear, and we tend to follow IDOT TRA 23 or MUTCD guidance pretty strictly as far as how we do conduct our analyses to determine if those types of crossing installations are needed. But in keeping with that, we are going to be trying to find ways to improve those crossings to make them safer, and like I said again, to mesh with the trail user expectations. So that's kind of the best answer I can give right now. But I think through the project process, we'll have a much better understanding of what we want those crossing guidelines to be.
And Ginger enthusiastically thanks you and thought it was a great presentation.
Thanks guys, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Sid. So I think that is all of the questions in the chat. I can't remember if you addressed this, but just the timeline for the East Branch DuPage River Trail, could you talk about that and just how it's just the process of it's complicated to get a trail anywhere where there's all this infrastructure already built up. So what is that process exactly like? And
so for the section north of 38 between Roosevelt and Great Western Trail, we anticipate it's going to take us a few years before we get to the point where it's shovel ready. I think 2025 to 26 is probably a good number to keep in your head as far as when we expect it to be done. If I'm not mistaken, phase one engineering typically takes a year and a half or so to 2 years. And so that'll bring us into 2023 if we are successful for the grant funds this year. It'll take another year or two to get through design engineering, and so that'll bring us to 2024, 25. And at that point, you've got the plans in hand. So it's just a matter of getting it constructed and funding that phase. So middle of this decade.
That's not bad, honestly. Like it's a very complicated process, and it's great to have you in your role helping move things forward. And yes, there's a handful of other comments in the chat box with people appreciating all of your work. And yes, thank you so much for taking the time and being so generous with your time to share what's going on in DuPage County. So
of course, happy to help out, guys. And you know, if you guys want to send me an email, ask me any other questions, I'm going to share my email in the chat box.
Great, thanks, Sid. All right, well, thank you, everyone. And DuPage County is blessed with lots of trails and amenities. So, and it sounds like we'll see more in the future. So
standing on the shoulders of giants, guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.